A little black girl raised her trembling hand and tapped a secret pattern on the police dog's paw. The dog froze, growled, and led officers to a discovery so dark it exposed a crime hidden in plain sight. The crowd pulsed like a living thing, a steady tide of suits and sneakers, briefcases brushing shoulders, coffee cups sloshing between elbows. Overhead, the flickering metro schedule buzzed updates in yellow light. Glenmont, Foreman near Shady Grove, delayed. The morning hum of Union Station filled every crack in the concrete, echoing off the cold tile walls like the rhythm of a city too busy to pause. In the middle of it all stood a girl no taller than a newspaper dispenser. Amara Johnson, age 8, barely moved. She kept her eyes low, her feet still, her small pink backpack clutched to her chest. Her brown cheeks were blotchy from crying, hours ago now, but her face held steady. Beside her, a man with a navy windbreaker and a woman in oversized sunglasses flanked her like bookends. They smiled too much, too wide. Not at her, but at everyone else. Their grip on her hands was firm, fingers dug in just enough to bruise without showing. They weren't her parents. 2 weeks ago, Amara had been on every missing poster in Washington, D.C. for 72 hours. Her photo, crooked pigtails, purple unicorn hoodie, had been plastered across bus stops and local news. But the headlines changed. Another story came. The world turned. People stopped looking. She hadn't said a word since. The man guided her forward as the train brakes shrieked down the tunnel. The woman fussed with a paper ticket at the kiosk, cursing under her breath when it jammed. Amara stood quietly, waiting. She had learned that noise brought punishment. Sometimes silence was the only place left to hide. Then she saw him. Across the platform, a tall black woman in a dark coat moved briskly along the yellow line. She held the leash of a German shepherd, muscular, alert, his ears perked like radar. His harness read, Sergeant Rex. His nose swept the air like a machine scanning for secrets. Amara's breath hitched. Detective Karen Morales, 38, was mid-conversation with a transit officer, her hand gesturing toward the escalators. She didn't see the girl watching, but the dog did. For a flicker of a moment, Amara remembered something. Her dad, before the hospital, before the ambulance, had watched documentaries about rescue dogs. One night she'd crawled into his lap, half asleep as a narrator explained, if a child is in danger and can't speak, they're trained to recognize 5 taps. It means, I need help. I'm not safe. She crouched slowly, pretending to tie her sneaker. Her fingers trembled. The woman snapped, Get up now. But Amara didn't move. She placed her hand near the dog's paw, close enough that he could feel it, and tapped. Once, twice, 3, 4, 5. The sound was barely louder than a heartbeat. But it reached him. Sergeant Rex stiffened. A low growl rumbled in his chest like thunder caught in a bottle. His head turned, slow, precise, and locked onto the man and woman standing behind the girl. Detective Morales froze mid-step. Easy, Rex? What is it, boy? She asked, voice tightening. She followed his gaze. Amara stood up slowly, eyes wide, face unreadable. The woman's hand clamped tighter around her wrist. The man said something under his breath, but the dog wouldn't stop staring, and the signal had been sent. The train doors hissed open and the platform stirred with motion. The couple stepped forward, pulling Amara between them, but the dog didn't budge. Sergeant Rex planted himself in their path, growling low and steady. His body blocked the entryway, chest squared, eyes locked on the man's face. The leash pulled taut in Morales's hand. Rex, heel, she said, firm but calm. The dog didn't move. Morales felt a twinge rise in her chest. Protocol was clear. K-9 units weren't meant to interfere with civilians unless commanded. But Rex had served through dozens of calls, 5 years on the force, and he had never disobeyed without reason. The man, tall, late 40s, pressed jeans and a windbreaker, gave a tense laugh. Ma'am, we've got a train to catch. Beside him, the woman adjusted her purse strap and smiled, too tight. He's probably just picking up our dog's scent. We have a labradoodle at home. Maybe it's that. Morales didn't answer. Her eyes flicked downward. At her boot lay a tiny gum wrapper, folded precisely like a school note. She bent to pick it up. Inside, scribbled in faint pencil, "Not my parents. Train 428, black duffel. Help." Her pulse kicked. The child hadn't looked at her once, still crouched near the door, tying a sneaker that didn't need fixing. But this was calculated, deliberate, and scared. "Rex, let's go," Morales murmured, guiding him to the side. The couple pulled Amara onto the train. Morales gave no signal, no sudden motion. Just a hand to her radio. "Dispatch Morales. Suspected abduction, Union Station. Boarding train 428 northbound. 3 subjects. I'm riding with them. Over." Static, then a crackle. "Affirmative, Morales. Backup in motion." The train lurched forward, doors sliding shut behind them. The car was half full, a scattered collection of commuters lost in screens and earbuds. Morales chose a seat across the aisle, angled enough to watch the girl without being obvious. Amara sat rigid between the couple, backpack in her lap. Her knees barely touched the edge of the seat. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink too much, but her eyes darted toward the window, the reflection, watching them from a mirrored angle. Morales followed her gaze. The man, Gerald by the ID on his gym bag, clutched a worn black duffel with both hands. His knuckles whitened every time the train jostled. It never left his side. The woman, Diane, kept talking softly, leaning over Amara like a doting mother. Her fingers toyed with the girl's hair, but her eyes were cold, scanning the car like she was waiting for someone to notice. No one did, except Rex. He sat on the floor beside Morales' knees, unusually still, his head resting on her lap. But his gaze didn't waver. He stared across the aisle, not at the man, not at the woman, at Amara. Not once did she look at the dog, but her fingers tapped lightly on her backpack strap. Once, twice, 3, 4, 5. A signal, repeated in silence. The ache in Morales' chest deepened, the same dull pressure that had haunted her for years. Another girl, another train. In another case, she hadn't moved on fast enough. She wouldn't let it happen again. Morales rose quietly from her seat, thumb hovering over the emergency alert button beneath her jacket. The wheels clattered beneath them as the train sped north. One stop left. Just one. The train hummed beneath them, the wheels clattering like a ticking clock Morales couldn't ignore. She moved car to car with purpose, flashing her badge, her voice steady and unthreatening. "Routine ID check," she said, seat to seat, her tone casual enough not to raise an alarm. Most passengers complied without a glance. A few grumbled but obeyed. No one asked questions. Then she reached them. The man handed over 2 IDs, his and the woman's, already in hand, like they'd expected this. "Gerald and Diane Brooks," he offered smoothly. "Is there a problem, officer?" She didn't answer right away. The cards were too clean. Lamination is barely set. When she tilted them toward the window, the fonts didn't quite match, spacing off by fractions. Anyone else wouldn't have noticed. Morales did. The woman smiled, eyes flicking from the badge to Morales' belt. "Everything all right?" Amara sat still, hands clasped in her lap. Then, without moving her head, she nudged the black duffel bag at the man's feet. A small kick, deliberate, quick, as if urging Morales to look. She did. The tag on the bag read, "For donation, generic, innocent, suspicious." Morales handed the IDs back and offered a short nod. "Thank you. Enjoy the ride." She moved down the aisle, but as she passed the adjacent car, she caught the eye of the plainclothes onboard marshal. A subtle gesture, 2 fingers to her belt, then a downward nod toward car 7. "Watch them." Behind her, Amara didn't move, but her eyes followed. 12 minutes to Portland Station. 2 weeks earlier. It had been a Saturday. Cool breeze. Sunlight on monkey bars. Amara had been drawing chalk rainbows when the woman walked up, purse swinging, smile wide. "Hey, sweetie, your mama said to come get you. She's running late. Want some gum?" She'd said no at first. Then maybe. Then yes, she was told she was lucky. "Not every kid gets a second chance," the woman said from the front seat. "You'll be adopted by a good family. You'll be safe." The bag had sat between them the whole drive. Black, zipped tight. The woman called it the kit. Inside were papers for the next kids. When Amara cried, she was told to hush. When she screamed, she wasn't fed for a day. After that, she stopped screaming. She learned to listen instead. Back in the train's rear cargo section, Morales stood alone with Rex. The train swayed as it took a turn, dim light flickering overhead. She'd used her secondary clearance to unlock the storage area, a tight corridor lined with suitcases and crates. Rex sniffed quickly, then paused at one corner. His ears perked. Nose to the duffel bag, he pawed once. Then again, let's see what's inside, boy. Morales knelt and unzipped it. What spilled out wasn't clothes. Stacks of passports bound by rubber bands. Dozens. All different names, different faces. All children. Bundles of cash, American, euros, pesos, Polaroid photos, each one showing a child holding a whiteboard. Each board had numbers. Some smiled. Most didn't. Her breath caught. She didn't speak for a long second. Then she muttered, "My God." Rex sat beside her, silent and watching. She pulled out her radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch Morales? We've got confirmed trafficking materials. Repeat. Child trafficking evidence on train 428. Preparing to intercept. I need a team at Portland Station. ETA 12 minutes. A pause. Then, copy that, Morales. Units en route. Proceed with caution." She zipped the bag closed and stood. Her fingers curled tight around the strap. 12 minutes. 12 minutes until this ride ended. For the girl. For the monsters beside her. For every kid in those photos who never made it out. The city blurred past the windows, trees thinning as Portland drew closer. The calm inside the train was uneasy now, quiet, but waiting, watching. Amara felt it in her chest, the ticking of time, the pounding of her heart. She'd overheard them, Gerald's low voice, the woman's sharp whispers. One more stop, transfer at Portland. Different train, different route. She'd never be seen again. She had one chance left. The black duffel sat at the man's feet, zipped tight again. She stared at it, then curled into herself, letting out a low, moaning sound. Her hand clutched her stomach. I don't feel good." The woman's smile dropped instantly. Her hand clamped onto Amara's shoulder, harder than it looked. "Now is not the time. I feel like I'm going to throw up." Amara groaned louder, slipping off the seat and onto the aisle floor. A few nearby passengers looked up. A man with headphones pulled one earbud out. A woman with a baby turned. "I said get up," the woman hissed through clenched teeth. Too harsh, too sharp. The mask slipped. Just enough. People noticed. Rex, still sitting calmly beside Morales a few rows away, suddenly tensed. His body shifted, pressing forward, inching toward the girl with growing urgency. Then Amara stood up, shaky legs, clenched fists, voice louder than she'd ever dared. "If you're my mommy," she said, facing the woman. "What's my birthday?" The car went still. The woman's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The man beside her stiffened. His hand reached instinctively for the duffel, but it was too late. The silence broke with murmurs. Passengers were watching now. The woman finally snapped, "You know when your birthday is. Don't play stupid." But Amara didn't flinch. "You don't know it," she said. "Because you're not my parents." The man stood up fast. "That's enough, is it?" Came a new voice. A conductor stepped forward. Middle-aged, sturdy, maroon vest with the name tag, Helen Torres. She kept her voice steady, but her hand hovered near the intercom. "Ma'am." "Sir, I'm going to need to see your IDs again." The woman's eyes darted toward the doors. "We already showed them." "Show them again," Miss Torres said louder now. "Please." The couple exchanged one quick glance. Panic flickered. Then the train shuddered. Overhead, a voice blared from the speaker. "Train 428. By order of Metro Security, all cars are now sealed. Remain seated. Law enforcement is on board." The woman made a move. So did the man. But Sergeant Rex was already in motion. He lunged forward with a sudden bark that startled the car. Passengers gasped as he vaulted the aisle, planting himself between Amara and her captors, snarling, teeth bared. The duffel toppled. Amara backed away, her tiny hand resting on Rex's fur, grounding herself in the only safe thing she'd known in days. Then Morales appeared, flanked by two transit agents in dark uniforms, badge raised. Diane and Gerald Brooks, you're under investigation for child trafficking and possession of fraudulent documents." The woman tried to run. The man grabbed the bag, but there was nowhere to go. Doors locked. Cameras live. Dozens of witnesses. The agents moved fast. Passengers started cheering, some clapping, some in shock, others rising to shield Amara as the arrest was made. Ms. Torres stood tall in the aisle, proud and unshaken. Morales crossed to the girl. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Amara nodded, tears welling, but her voice stayed strong. "I remembered what he said," she whispered, petting Rex's head, "about the 5 taps, and I was brave." Morales knelt beside her. "You were more than brave. You were unstoppable." As the train slowed into Portland Station, emergency crews waited on the platform, ready. The nightmare was ending, and for the first time in 2 long weeks, Amara was going home. Sure. Here's the complete 800-word version of Outline 5, The Revelation, crafted to match the requested length and content. Portland Station pulsed with chaos and clarity as train 428 ground to a halt. The screech of metal against the track gave way to a wall of flashing lights, officers flooding the platform, and a sea of startled passengers peering from behind glass and barricades. Red and blue lights danced across the polished tile floors, marking the end of a ride that had almost swallowed a child whole, handcuffed and wordless. Gerald and Diane Brooks were escorted down the steps of Car 7. Their heads were down now, the calm, calculated smiles long gone. All that remained were pale faces and cuffed wrists, the illusion finally broken. Behind them, officers began unloading the cargo hold, pulling duffel after duffel onto the platform. The bags were worn, mismatched, and eerily silent. Each one seemed like just another piece of luggage, until they were unzipped. Inside were things no commuter should carry: forged adoption records, fake vaccination forms, counterfeit school documents, and bundles of photos. Children with blank stares and numbered tags. Some bags held baby shoes. Others, small stuffed animals or tattered backpacks with names written in crayon. None of the names matched Amara Johnson. Detective Karen Morales watched silently as the evidence mounted. She moved slowly toward the girl now seated near the platform's edge, flanked by a quiet officer and a very alert German shepherd who had refused to leave her side. Rex. He sat with his head pressed against Amara's knee, tail motionless, body tense, not in fear, but in vigilance. He had found her. He had listened. Morales knelt beside them. Her voice was soft but steady. "You were the signal, weren't you?" Amara nodded, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. "He listened," she whispered. "Nobody else ever does." Morales felt the ache in her chest deepen. Not sadness exactly, but something close. Gratitude, maybe. Or guilt for all the times someone like Amara hadn't been heard. "You're safe now," she said. Rex licked Amara's hand gently, the tip of his tongue barely grazing her skin. She reached out, curling her fingers in his fur like she needed the grounding. Maybe she did. A quiet clap echoed from behind. Then another. A ripple, soft but insistent. The passengers who had witnessed it all, the tap, the question, the unraveling, were clapping. Some stood silently with phones raised, recording everything. Others wiped their eyes. A few simply nodded at Morales as if to say, "Thank you for listening." The applause wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Within minutes, the internet did the rest. Phones buzzed. Headlines spread like wildfire across social media. Little girl's tap saves dozens. K9. Hero exposes child trafficking ring. Brave child outsmarts. Traffickers on train 428. What's my birthday? Sparks takedown. Sergeant Rex and the 8-year-old hero. Child trafficking network crumbles. Morales turned toward the growing line of press along the perimeter. News vans rolled up like storm clouds. Reporters shouted questions over flashing lenses. She ignored them all. A federal agent approached. Breathless, holding a laptop retrieved from the trafficker's duffel bag. "Detective," he said, "you need to see this." She stood, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" "Every passport, every document. It's all connected to a name. Dr. Harrison Vale." Morales stiffened. "The pediatrician? The one who runs those family services clinics?" The agent nodded grimly. He's been posing as a child advocate, setting up nonprofit adoption centers across the country. All of them are just fronts. Her throat tightened. How long? Years, maybe more. We're pulling records now. Dozens of kids. This is national. Another officer stepped forward with a folder from the bag. Inside were profiles. Names, fake family assignments, transport logs, all meticulously labeled. Morales stared at the top sheet. A photo of a boy, maybe 6, smiling nervously while holding a number board. His name, Dante. His destination, placement facility. Pending. My God, she breathed. This isn't just a smuggling op. It's a trafficking archive. The agent nodded. You just cracked it wide open. Thanks to her. Morales turned back to Amara, who still sat silently, Rex pressed against her side. The little girl looked up at her, cautious but calm. Do you know your full name? Morales asked gently. Amara Johnson, she whispered. My dad, his name was Terrence. Morales crouched again. Your father taught you the signal, didn't he? Amara nodded. He said if I ever got lost, 5 taps would mean I needed help. Well, Morales said, placing a hand on her shoulder. He was right. And you were brave enough to use it. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The noise, the lights, the flood of news. There was just a girl, a detective, and a dog who refused to let evil pass unnoticed. Tears welled in Morales' eyes, but she blinked them back. You saved lives today, Amara. Not just your own, dozens. Amara looked down, her voice barely audible. Can I go home now? Morales nodded. We'll get you there. And this time, the world was watching and listening. In the weeks that followed the takedown at Portland Station, the world turned its gaze toward an 8-year-old girl with a pink backpack and a story no one could forget. Operation Amara. They called it federal agents, working with state and local law enforcement, launched a sweeping investigation based on the evidence recovered from Train 428. The duffel bags, the fake passports, the files, and Amara's own testimony unlocked something far bigger than a single case. Morales' instincts had been right. The train was just a thread. The network stretched coast to coast. Raids began within 72 hours, abandoned clinics, shuttered warehouses, rented homes dressed up as adoption centers, all connected to a single name, Dr. Harrison Vale. A pediatric specialist with a spotless record, Vale had built his empire in plain sight. Charities, family advocacy fronts, glowing testimonials. But behind it all was a cold, organized system of trafficking, masked as compassion. By the end of the second week, the numbers were staggering. 74 children were rescued. 15 arrests in 8 states. 4 underground transport routes dismantled. And one mastermind, Dr. Vale, detained by federal agents at his private clinic outside Denver. Amara Johnson had remembered everything, every van route, every phrase she'd overheard. The name of a motel in Indiana, the way they coded the folders, green dots for girls under 10, red stars for immediate transit. She'd heard them whisper, repeat, and plan when they thought she wasn't listening. But Amara always listened. Her memory was sharp, not just for survival, but because she knew that someday someone might ask the right questions, and when they did, she would be ready. Detective Morales sat beside her during every interview, quietly stunned by the detail the girl could recall. The agents didn't lead her. They didn't have to. She laid out timelines, identified handlers by face and voice, and even corrected dates when the paperwork didn't match. She's not just brave, one agent said. She's brilliant. Across the country, headlines exploded. Operation Amara uncovers. Nationwide trafficking network. Girl's silent signal sparks 74 rescues. The child who brought down a criminal empire. Talk shows flooded the airwaves. News specials replayed the train station footage on a loop. Amara's steady voice asking, "If you're my mommy, what's my birthday?" Talk show hosts called her the girl who taught a police dog to talk. The phrase stuck. Cartoonists drew her in superhero capes, always with Rex by her side. Schools held assemblies about bravery. Children practiced the 5-tap signal on their desks, their parents nodding solemnly beside them. But for all the attention, Amara stayed mostly out of the spotlight, So did Morales. The detective turned down every interview. She didn't want the story to be about her. Not the old mistakes. Not the case she hadn't solved years ago. This one mattered, because a little girl had refused to be forgotten, and a dog had known how to listen. All credit goes to Amara and Rex, Morales told reporters outside the precinct one evening. They saved each other. I was just lucky enough to witness it. It wasn't long before Amara was placed with a foster family trained for high-trauma cases. A couple with no cameras, no press releases, and a quiet farmhouse an hour outside the city. She had a new bed, a garden, 2 kittens that slept on her windowsill. There were bad dreams sometimes, but fewer now. She was safe. She was healing, and one day she asked if she could visit the station. Just once. Not for an interview, not for a headline. For Rex. It was quiet that afternoon. No reporters. No noise. Amara walked slowly into the K-9 unit, Morales by her side. Sergeant Rex sat calmly in his kennel, tail wagging the moment he saw her. She crouched in front of the gate, pressing her hand through the bars. "You heard me," she whispered. When no one else did, Rex leaned forward, nudging her hand gently with his snout. A soft whine escaped his throat. Not loud, but enough. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't affection. It was recognition, the kind that lives between survivors, the kind that doesn't need words. Morales stood a few steps back, letting the moment be theirs. She didn't speak, didn't interrupt. She just watched. Amara leaned in, forehead against the cool steel of the gate. "You remembered the 5 taps. My daddy said the good dogs would." Rex gave a single steady bark, then sat, watching her as if to say, "I always would." Back in the squad room later, Morales pinned a small photo to the corkboard, one snapped quietly by a fellow officer, Amara kneeling beside Rex, the station light casting soft gold across the floor. Beneath it, Morales wrote in black ink, "Operation Amara. Never again ignored." And across the country, in homes and schools and shelters, children were being taught a signal, 5 soft taps against a hard surface. A code for courage. A call for help. And thanks to one girl, one dog, and one moment of daring, the world finally knew how to listen. Months later, the federal courthouse stood tall and quiet beneath a gray winter sky. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Agents in dark suits, journalists with notepads poised, victims' families seated in hushed rows. The long, tangled case that had begun on Train 428 had finally arrived at its end. At the defense table, Margaret and Richard Brooks sat pale and hollow-eyed, no longer the smiling, well-dressed strangers who had once gripped Amara Johnson's wrists. Their hands trembled. Their suits hung loose. Even now, they refused to meet each other's eyes. Beside them, separated by a wall of federal attorneys, sat Dr. Harrison Vale. He wore his white hair neatly combed, his frame as rigid as it had been in televised interviews years ago, the compassionate pediatrician, the philanthropist. But now, shackled, exposed, and silent, his legacy had unraveled into something monstrous. He showed no emotion, only the smallest flicker in his jaw when the charges were read aloud again. Multiple counts of child trafficking, conspiracy, false documentation, interstate transport of minors, the judges. Voice echoed through the courtroom like the slow toll of a bell. Then came the testimony. Most of the rescued children were too young to speak or too frightened to recall details. Some sat beside new guardians, holding stuffed animals or avoiding the cameras entirely. But one girl's name stood on the docket, Amara Johnson. She did not walk into the courtroom. Instead, her face appeared on a large monitor to the right of the jury box. Testifying via closed circuit from a child advocacy center nearby, she sat upright in a neat dress, her pink backpack just visible at her side. Her hair was braided, her shoulders square. "Can you tell us who took you, Amara?" the prosecutor asked gently. She looked at the screen, and through it. "The lady said she was my new mommy, but she wasn't. She didn't know my birthday. Do you see her here today?" Amara nodded once. The camera panned to the defense table. Margaret Brooks flinched. "And what did you do when you saw the police dog on the train?" A pause. Then, steady as a thread pulled tight, Amara replied, "I tapped 5 times. Because my daddy said good dogs know what that means." No one spoke. The courtroom held its breath. She answered every question with the same quiet courage, detailing what she remembered, how she stayed quiet, how Rex had listened. The judge thanked her personally. The prosecutor called her a national symbol of bravery. The defense didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. By the end of the proceedings, the sentences were handed down. Margaret and Richard Brooks, 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of early release. Dr. Harrison Vale, life imprisonment without parole. The courtroom exhaled. Behind the gallery, families who had been reunited with their missing children wept openly. One mother pressed her hand over her mouth, her toddler squirming on her lap. A father clutched his daughter's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white, but she didn't let go. The headlines came fast that afternoon. Justice. For the children. Operation Amara ends in historic. Sentencing. Trafficking ringleader gets life. 8-year-old's testimony seals fate. But beyond the courtroom, far from the microphones and flashes, something smaller, quieter, more lasting took place. A week after the verdict, a ceremony was held at the Washington, D.C. Metro Police Department. Small, formal, and close to the press. No cameras. No interviews. Inside the precinct, Detective Karen Morales stood in her dress uniform as the police commissioner pinned a medal on her chest, a silver star engraved with the words for bravery in the line of duty. Her citation noted her refusal to ignore instinct, her commitment to the truth, and the trust she placed in a child's silent plea. But Morales only smiled when they called her name. When asked to speak, she said simply, "All I did was listen. The real hero is the one who made me hear." Then came the final presentation. Sergeant Rex, now gray around the muzzle but still sharp-eyed and alert, padded slowly into the room to a standing ovation from officers and staff. His K9 harness had been removed for the last time. In its place was a navy blue service sash embroidered with "Honorably Retired, Sergeant Rex, K9 Unit." He sat proudly beside Morales, tail thumping once on the tile floor. Then, from the side entrance, Amara entered. She was taller now, more confident. Still wore her pink backpack, though it sagged with schoolbooks instead of fear. Her foster parents stood at a respectable distance, letting her walk ahead alone. She crossed the room, knelt beside Rex. The room quieted. Amara placed her small hand gently on his paw and tapped. Once, twice, 3, 4, 5. This time, it wasn't a signal for help. This time, it meant thank you. Rex leaned into her hand and let out a soft huff of breath, a kind of sigh, a kind of answer. Morales looked away, blinking hard, because some victories don't shout. They whisper, in 5 soft taps. 1 year later, the world had moved on, but in a quiet park near Amara's new school, the story still lived in the smallest of moments. The grass was warm under the sun, scattered with autumn leaves. Children ran in loose circles, laughter echoing through the air. At the center of it all, Rex lay lazily beneath a tree, his muzzle grayer now, his eyes soft with age. His honorary K9 badge swung gently from his collar, catching glints of light with each breath he took. Detective Karen Morales sat nearby on a bench, coffee in hand, watching with a smile that reached her eyes. The city moved fast, but this moment was still. A few feet away, Amara Johnson, once silent, now smiling, vibrant, sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket, reading from a book to a small group of classmates. Her voice was steady, clear. "It's not just about listening with your ears," she said, holding the page for them to see. "Sometimes you have to listen with your heart." The children nodded, leaning closer. Off to the side, a journalist from a local paper approached Morales gently. "Detective," she asked, "do you think she changed you?" Morales didn't hesitate. She looked toward Amara, then at Rex. "She reminded me," she said, "that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it taps, 5 times, and waits for someone to hear." The bell rang in the distance. Amara stood, slung her backpack over her shoulder and knelt beside Rex. She hugged him tightly, whispering just loud enough for Morales to hear, "You found me," and everyone else. As she ran off toward class, the sunlight caught Rex's badge, making it shine, and as the screen faded to black, 5 soft taps echoed faintly in the distance. Sometimes, heroes don't need voices, just the courage to send a signal.